I'm joining you from Meeting Place Farm, which is about 20 kilometers east of Lake Huron in Huron County on the province of Ontario. And our farm is on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Odawa, and the Mississauga. And we farm it with gratitude and try and remember the long-term stewardship that occurred in this area before the settler community arrived. I bought the farm in 1973 as a 21-year-old who knew I wanted to farm, but really probably didn't know very much about farming. My wife joined me in 1975, and we had bought a rather played out old farm that had been cash crop for a number of years with no manure or cover crops going back onto it. It's fairly hilly and eroded, and only had one small outbuilding on it, which we lived in for 2 years while we built a house. We had some unfortunate things happen in our early years. The first year, a bunch of our crop was damaged by the previous farmer's herbicide application. And the second year, we basically lost our whole crop when the neighbor we'd been working with changed his harvest schedule, and we had a very wet fall, and our grain all sprouted before it got combined. So that was a point at which we decided we didn't have much to lose by trying to farm organically, and that we would need to have our own equipment. And that led to a bunch of decisions. But over the years, we've done many things. We were shifting to being a livestock farm in the 70s, 80s. We survived the high interest rates of the 70s and early 80s. And but we were starting to have some challenges in that I'd given up on planning after the first couple of years because my plans never seemed to work out. And I just thought, if you just put your head down and work harder, maybe things will get better. And we were raising about 110 ewes and their lambs, which we were selling at the stockyards. And my wife was getting to the point of saying, nope, after supper, I'm not working harder. I'm going to sit down and read a book. And this was leading to some tension between us. So after we'd been on the farm for 20 years together and had the farm for 22, we took our first holistic management course, and that was a powerful thing for us because working through the quality of life and our values, we realized we had a lot in common, and she didn't really want me to work to death, and I didn't want her to be unhappy and angry about the workload on the farm. And to make a fairly long story short, taking the course helped us realize that we could stop having the farm manage us, and that we could start managing the farm to meet our needs as a family. We had some young daughters in their early teens or preteens, but we could start managing the farm to meet our needs, and that these decisions were within our control, and that the holistic management toolbox gave us a set of tools that we could use to help make those decisions. And in a sense, it helped us regenerate our relationship, do some regeneration of our family dynamic with our daughters, certainly helped do a better job of regenerating our land and regenerating our farm income stream, so that it then did let us do what we wanted to do on the farm. So I've been farming for over 50 years now, been a holistic management practitioner for, I guess, going on 25, 27 years now, and I found it very helpful. So what I want to do today is share with you some ideas, but also share with you some stories from our experience about how making decisions with holistic management have helped us become more regenerative in many different areas. So I'm going to see if I can share my screen now and move into a bunch of slides. I have hope that if you have questions, if you'll put them in the chat, Maria is going to monitor them, and we will deal with questions at the end. I think we'll have probably a good half hour at the end to address questions, and it will give her an opportunity to perhaps put similar questions together. but I think this will be perhaps the best way to have a fairly smooth flow of the actual presentation. So here's where we are. And we'll see if this thing will advance. Okay, I'm going to stop and try a different one here. Still having the joy of learning how to make all this technology work. Okay, so the thing I wanted to think about is, what do we mean by regenerative? And for me, I think about things that are growing, that are alive, something that's healthy. You know, if I get a cut of that, my skin starts to regenerate. Something that's healing, particularly regenerative when we think about soil and soil health, healing a lot of the damage that we've done. But I also try and remember to think about decomposing and cycling, because we have in Western culture, a very linear approach to things, and there's certainly talking about growth, as opposed to cycling of growth and decay, life and death, the rhythms and patterns of existence. And for me, there are a couple of things that have been very helpful for creating a paradigm shift in how I see the world and how I think about things. And one of them is Hazel Henderson's cake chart. She was an economist who many decades ago now said, I'm tired of pie charts, and said, I want to look at a layered cake chart, or a cake chart. And what she said was, she's got this layer cake, and this is a fairly complex side, but she said the bottom layer is nature, is all the things that are out there in the natural world, the cycling of, you know, what in holistic management we talk about, the water cycle, the mineral cycle, energy flow, biodiversity. All that is in the bottom layer of the cake. And the next layer of cake is human society, what she, it's sometimes called the love economy, because it was the place where parents looked after and fed their kids without charging them. People helped with the local sports club, or did some coaching, or did some volunteering, or helped a neighbor. My Amish community does barn raisings and that sort of thing. And then the next layer was the layer of government, where you have, you know, the national, municipal, state, or provincial governments doing the things that are necessary to sort of connect and protect society. And then the top layer was the private sector. But she said the really critical thing to understand is that each layer rests on the one below it. And if you listen to our newscasts and the, you know, focus on the stock market and the economy, you'd think it was the other way around. But I found this a good one. The other point she made is that the bottom two layers, nature and the love economy, sweat equity, bartering, parents looking after kids, the household economy, those aren't monetized. And so they don't show up when we talk about gross national product or those sorts of things. So they tend to be just ignored all too often when decisions are being made. And for me, one of the powerful things about holistic management was trying to say, no, we can't ignore nature. We can't ignore the social component when we're making decisions. And so I found that an interesting image, and I share it with you. And at the end, I'm going to be putting my slides in a situation where, if you're interested in them, you can get them from the Regenerate conference website. So the other more recent one is Kate Raworth's Donut Economics. And she said, you know, her donut has, the outer ring of her donut is the ecological ceiling. We need to be careful not to break through. And the inner ring of her donut is the social foundation of the needs of society that we better not fall below if we're going to have a good, what she called the safe and just space for humanity. And she talks about it as being the 21st century compass to help us stay below that ecological ceiling and above the social foundation. And again, it seems to me it was a visual that put a lot of information in a small space, and helped certainly me think about how we change our paradigm, or sort of see things a bit differently. So again, I would recommend her book, Donut Economics, because it helps explain how modern economics got so detached from the ecosystem, from the community or society, and unfortunately even from how economies really work. I found it a very useful book to read. So for me, holistic management has been a compass and a toolkit, which in many ways helps us recapture the wisdom of regenerative thinking. And that was a wisdom that I think was probably the standard paradigm for many of the indigenous cultures around the globe, and certainly here in North America, talking about thinking out through 7 generations, what are the implications of decisions being made. So, you know, in holistic management, we didn't invent it, but we're certainly rediscovering it and learning ways to apply it with people who come from a more Cartesian Western perspective or background. So what's the process? And I'm going to go through a really quick review here. If many of you are already holistic management practitioners, this may be old hat, but I wanted to touch on it. So to me, it's a decision-making process that looks at our values with the holistic goal and the quality of life we are identifying. It helps us get in touch with our dreams, with our holistic goal and the vision. It helps us with implementation, because when we do the holistic goal and look at what we used to call the forms of production, but are now behaviors and systems, it helps us think about, well, how do we get to the vision? How do we create that quality of life? And in the testing questions, it forces us to look at the environment, the social side of things with the testing questions, and the financial side of things with the testing questions. And then one of the things that I found really powerful when I was introduced to holistic management was the idea of what's a tool? Because, you know, up to that point, I was thinking the tool's a hammer, or it's a screwdriver, or it's a tractor, or it's, you know, it's a piece of technology. But holistic management helped me expand my thinking, because we talk about creativity being one of the powerful tools that we have at our disposal. Certainly technology, and in many forms, is part of it. But then the idea that rest, letting land rest for a while, maybe even letting an argument rest for a while, has a value and has some things that we need to ponder and consider if it's going to be a helpful tool to use in moving toward our goals. The idea that grazing, the way we manage our grazing, is a tool, and that animals have an impact, and how we manage animals can increase or reduce the impact they have in a given location or place. The idea that biological organisms are a valuable and important tool to keep in mind and consider. And then the idea that money and labor can be used as a tool to move forward on things was, again, very helpful to me. And then we have a group of procedures: the financial planning, the planned grazing, planned cropping, land planning, are all things that, again, help us with the implementation or moving in the direction that we want to move. So I want to just touch real briefly on the holistic goal, because as I say, it was going through the process of creating a holistic goal helped my wife and I get back on the same page and start moving forward together. And it also helped us work with our daughters, and we'll talk more about that. But I think there's a huge power of having a goal and decision-making that's aligned with our values. And for us, we created the goal on the left there, which is, you know, a lot of words on a piece of paper, but 3 paragraphs that you can read fairly quickly and use to remind yourself. That was one that was laminated back in January of 2008, and what I had a photograph of. But we like to keep it on the fridge or on top of the fridge, where it's handy when we want to talk about a decision that we're needing to make. But the one on the right was one I saw at a holistic management conference, and I thought was really creative. And this was a family with quite young children, but they wanted to involve their kids in helping create the family holistic goals. So they made a collage of the things that were important. And so you had visual pictures, you had words, you had a whole range of things that they could look at as a family with young children when they were trying to make decisions and talk about their holistic goal. And just a quick review of the testing questions or the testing guidelines, cause and effect. What is the root problem here? What is the issue that we really are addressing or need to be addressing? The weak link question or guideline, and the idea that we need to look at for possible social weak links. If we're dealing with a problem in the natural world, what are the biological weak links? And then the financial weak links, and we'll touch a little more on the financial one down the road. Marginal reaction, where's the best return for effort or money? The gross profit analysis, is this actually contributing to your operation if you're looking at a financial question? And then the issue of energy, money, use, and source. Particularly having survived the high interest rates of the late 70s and early 80s, that was a question that struck us as really important. And then the sustainability. Is this going to let you keep going in the direction you want if you make this decision? That's good. And then the society and culture, gut reaction. How do I feel after all this? And to me, one of the very powerful aspects of the testing guidelines is we're often faced with situations that aren't clear cut. You know, it sort of at times would feel like, well, it's 6 of one and half a dozen of the other, and you just sort of dither and not be able to make a decision. And what I found was that after going through the cause and the whole series of testing guidelines, it became much easier to say, okay, how have I synthesized that? How do I feel? What's our gut reaction? And there are a couple other factors that help with that decision-making process, because when you go through this process, and I'm not going to read this one, you hopefully are going to be moving toward your goal. And because we monitor to see if it's actually taking us where we go, I know now that if I make a decision here and my monitoring shows me that it's not taking me where I want to go, then it's simply a matter of doing some discussion and change our planning and try this one and see if it actually would take us where we want to go. So it made it much easier to make decisions and, you know, go for them wholeheartedly. But one of the things that's certainly important there is the point number 2, that when we do the testing, it has to be in relationship to that 3-part goal. And we certainly found it as a real aid to making consistently better decisions that were and took into account the social, environmental, and financial concerns of us as a family and of our farm operation. So what we did was we built a little form that helps us go through it. And when we use the form, we make sure that we clearly state what's the decision we're testing. We read the holistic goal before we start using the testing questions so that it is fresh in our mind. And to me, one of the really valuable aspects of the holistic management system or process is that, you know, we make decisions all the time. And if you're rereading your holistic goal each time you're making a decision, even if there are aspects in your holistic goal that don't specifically apply to the particular decision you're making, you're reminded of that whole package of values and practices and vision that you worked out together. And so it's a constant reminder of what you're trying to do, where you're trying to go, who you're trying to be and become. So I think that's a very powerful part of it. So then we take it through the testing questions, and then at the bottom we state what's the decision, who were the decision makers who were present for that discussion, and what we'll monitor to ensure that it's taking us where we want to go. So this, you know, becomes a process that we've found very helpful. We involved our daughters in developing the holistic goal, and in 95, they were 14 and 12. And they didn't come with us to the meetings, but in the evenings, we'd try and share with them what we'd learned. And it was exciting to us to hear that there were a number of things when we started talking about values and what we liked that they did like about the farm. But something that was a real sore point for them as farm kids was they never got to take a summer holiday. And they'd come back to school in the fall and all the other kids would be talking about the summer holiday they went on with their families. And they got to do things like, raise chickens and look after roasting hens and hutches out on the field, or feed the little laying hens. And, my idea of a holiday was, let's go skiing in our bush during the winter when things aren't so busy on the farm. We did do some traveling to family, but we certainly hadn't taken a summer holiday. So they made that pretty clear. And so we took the course in 1995. And part of the thing about holistic management is listening to other people, hearing what they have to say, valuing what they had to say. And up to that point, I'd always felt, I'm a farmer in Ontario, like we got winter nearly half the year, it sometimes seems. How could you take a summer holiday? There's so much work to get done. The to-do list, you run out of the season before you run out of the to-do list for summer or fall or spring or winter. So there's always just more work that you can get done in the time available. So, summer holiday, who are you kidding? I'm a farmer. But having listened to our daughters, Fran and I talked about it and said, well, what if we tried to take a summer holiday? What might that involve? And so we made a commitment to take off for the month of August in 1996 and take a summer holiday and go out to British Columbia. And there were some things going on out there. There was a youth program in our Canadian yearly meeting, the Quaker National Gathering. And there was a youth week before the main week. And so we've decided we'd try and go out to British Columbia for a month. And I personally at the time thought, well, this would be a really good test of holistic management. Is this actually something that works, or is this going to prove that holistic management doesn't work? Because I was a bit skeptical, but thought, well, let's give it a try. And so we did. And one of the things that we'd learned about was using a paper worksheet. Now most people would use a spreadsheet on a computer, but we had started looking at each of our different enterprises and then look at when different things in that enterprise happened each month and how many people days that activity was likely to take. And it was a real eye-opener for us as we started looking at the 1996 year, because in a number of months, Fran and I were trying to do the work that we figured it would take 4 people to do. So it was no wonder we felt run a bit ragged and were biting each other's tails occasionally. But laying it out this way really helped us look at, well, what are we hoping to get done this summer? What are the things we have to get done? And what do we have to do to open up that column of the month of August to not need to be at the farm? And so that was a process that helped us think about how to rejuggle the workload for 1996. Another tool that was very helpful was the grazing plan and control chart, because up to then we'd been doing rotational grazing, but I'd been trying to keep notes on pieces of paper or keep stuff in a notebook, and it was very hard to see stuff, very hard to find where you'd been and that. And with the planned grazing chart, I figured that I could lay out what I thought would be the good rotation while we were gone for a month. And if the person looking after the farm filled it in while they were in charge of the farm, I could come back and see what actually happened. And so I felt much more confident about leaving the farm. And so we realized that there were a number of things we needed to do. So if we were going to plan to take off the month of August, we needed to find someone to look after the farm. And so we were open to what might happen, could we find someone? And we were approached by a woman who wanted to learn from us and was in a situation where she wanted to come out a week, a month to learn through the season with us. And we said, well, yeah, we'd be glad to do that with you if you'll take your summer holiday and look after the farm for the month of August. And she said, oh, yeah, that would work. So that started to open up that we had somebody to look after the farm. Well, next thing that we were thinking about was normally we would be growing grain for our livestock at that time and harvesting it in August. But we had enough challenges getting grain harvested when we were around that it wasn't something I wanted to try and be working on from British Columbia. So we thought, well, we could purchase the grain that we would need for our sheep and other things and not have to try and grow it ourselves. So that meant we weren't having to worry about harvest in August because we had been doing our own grain harvest. And it also then freed up spring planting, because if we weren't harvesting grain in August, we weren't going to plant it in the spring. And we had been planning to rebuild a greenhouse that year. And we realized that if we weren't doing the spring planting, we could do a bunch of construction in the spring, but that would mean that we wouldn't have our greenhouse available because we'd be tearing it down and rebuilding it. And so that meant we had to find somebody who could grow the transplants that we needed for our market garden in 1996. So thinking about it in January and February and March helped us develop a plan of how we could take a holiday, take our family away for the month of August. And it all fell into place until partway into the summer, we learned that our daughter, who had been accepted in a French exchange program for that coming fall, had her French exchange student arriving at the end of the first week of August. And normally that might have just completely derailed our plans and say, oh, well, we can't do this. But because of the concept in holistic management that you make the best plan you can, and then when things go a bit awry, you replan, that's what we did. And we said, well, what do we need to do to make this work? And so we contacted the people in charge of the exchange program. We contacted her and her parents, and were able to make arrangements that when she got off the plane at the Toronto airport with all the other exchange students for Ontario, somebody knew what to do, and we had bought her a ticket, and they put her on a plane to come out to British Columbia, where we met her at the Vancouver airport. And so she joined us for our family holiday. So here are some pictures from the McQuail's first family holiday in 1996. In the upper left, we'd done some practice hiking with our daughters that spring and summer. And then in the lower right, you'll see the group of us there. Instead of a family of 4, a family of 5 with the French exchange student in the center on a hiking trail trip in the mountains of British Columbia. And I came away from that experience with a number of good lessons. First, holistic management works. We had a wonderful time. We were able to do it. And in some ways, we use the same thinking that we do when we talk about grazing planning and saying, well, if you want to have the animals in this strip on this date because you're wanting to ship cattle or you're wanting to put the bull in or whatever, then you work backwards from where you want them on this date and take all the steps that you need so that they get there at the right time. They're at the right place at the right time for the right reason. Well, we did that with the planning for this holiday. We said we want to be away in August. What are the steps that we need to do to get to that position? And it worked. The other things that I learned from that were, up until then, I'd hated trying to take off for a weekend or a week to go visit family in the summer because, I would take and cram 2 weeks of work into the week before we left. And when we got back, I'd try and cram 2 weeks of work into the week we got back. And the week I was away, I'd be worrying about what I didn't get done on the to-do list before we left and worry about how things were going while we were away and worrying about what I needed to be on top of as soon as we got back. So I'd cram 4 weeks of work into a 3-week period, and it wasn't very restful. Well, did the same thing that I crammed 2 weeks of work into the week before we left and 2 weeks of work into the week we got back. But that was now a 6-week period with a 4-week holiday between those 2 weeks of crammed work. And in the middle 2 weeks, I got so relaxed. I stopped worrying about what I hadn't got done, and I wasn't worrying about what I needed to get done when I got back. And it was just incredibly relaxing compared with what any previous holiday had been like. And the other thing that I learned was that I wasn't as indispensable to the farm as I thought I was. When we got back, the farm was still there. The animals were still alive. Not everything had gotten done the way it would have if I'd been there, but when I am there, not everything gets done the way I hope it will get done. The to-do list still keeps moving on. So it was a great learning experience. And after that, we did try and not take a holiday like that every year, but every 2 or 3 years, try and do something as a family. Sometimes it wasn't in the summer, sometimes it would be in the winter, but we had gotten much more comfortable saying we're not indispensable here. And there are other values that we're wanting to support as a family and as a farm. So that was one of our early learning experiences. And another thing is the importance of integrating the financial planning with the holistic goal. Both my wife and I had been working off farm, either part-time or full-time, one or both of us, in the first 20 some years of our farm effort. And we were really feeling like we wanted to be full-time on the farm at that stage in our lives, to be able to focus on the farm and to not be as scattered between off-farm work and what we were trying to do on the farm. And the financial planning process really helped us then look at how we might do that. And we looked at our different enterprises, looked at the things that we enjoyed doing, and realized that we could perhaps each have an area. Fran's holding the meat there, but I tended to be the one doing the pasture work and raising animals, and she developed a CSA garden, a community supported garden that grew to be providing the vegetables through the summer for about 50 families in our area. And we expanded our meat retail business and actually diversified. We had been, as I said, raising sheep and selling lambs at the stockyards. And so we actually cut back our sheep flock and increased our offering to include pastured poultry, roasting chickens, grass-fed and finished beef, pastured pork, as well as the lamb at that time. So it was a way that we could improve the return from our efforts on the farm. And the thing that really helped me in a lot of ways was the financial weak link effort. And when we talk about the financial weak link, we're talking about resource conversion, our ability to turn sunlight into something, either a crop or into a forage that we can feed to some animal. We talk about the product conversion link. Are we able to take that stuff and turn it into a marketable product? And then finally, the market or money conversion, which is, are you able to take that product and sell it, or sell it at least for enough money that it gives you an adequate return? And this was a really good discipline to apply to each of our enterprises. And when we did that, it helped us really think about, okay, where are the weak links in the different enterprises? How do we strengthen them? And I was not somebody who enjoyed marketing, maybe still not, but I grew up in the country. I was in a Boy Scout troop where our Christmas fundraiser was to sell greens to people to make wreaths and things along their banisters or to tie on their front door. And so I would walk around the country block, walking up these long lanes past spruce trees and pine trees and cedar trees to try and sell some aged evergreens, cuttings and wreaths to people who already had everything they needed to make their own. So marketing hadn't been a lot of fun for me as a kid, but using the weak link identification process certainly identified that if we were going to be successful in our CSA and in our meat retailing, that marketing was where we need to focus time and effort and maybe even some money to reach out and expand the market and the customers that we had. And so again, that was a really good discipline, and having a plan for how to do that meant we actually got it done and it worked. So again, one of the powerful concepts to me of holistic management. Another early decision that helped me appreciate the value of holistic management was probably the winter of 96, 97. We had a snow blower that we used to clear the lane, and we have a fairly long lane, and it slopes up from the west, and our winds are from the west, so you always had to blow downhill because that's a two-wheel drive tractor. So we were blowing downhill into the wind with the snow blower, and I'd come in looking like the Pillsbury Dough guy. But after we'd taken the course, I think it was that fall or the next one, the first snowfall that I had the blower out on, some stuff broke and I had to do some welding and repair. And the second snowfall came along and the main drive bearing went, and didn't feel like it was worth trying to repair it. And prior to holistic management, we'd have just said, oh, we got to bite the bullet. We got to go out and buy a new snow blower or buy the best used one we can find. But because we'd taken holistic management, we took it through the testing questions, and well, what's the problem we're trying to solve? And well, it's that we have this long lane, and that we get a lot of snow because we're in the snow belt along the coast of Lake Huron. And I was the only one of the family who was prepared to say, well, we could just dig out a hole at the bottom of the lane and park the car in that, and walk up or ski up or snowshoe up to the house and back down. And nobody else in the family thought that was a creative idea, or at least not an acceptable creative idea. But then we started brainstorming, well, what are different things we could do? Well, maybe we could hire the neighbor to blow the lane, or maybe the idea of shoveling it out with a shovel wasn't another acceptable option, though that was one of the brainstorm things that came up. But we also have Amish neighbors who had horse-drawn snow scoops, and so we considered a variety of things, contacted the neighbor to check on whether he'd be interested, and he wasn't. He already had a number of lanes he had to blow out, and he knew ours wasn't the easiest lane to deal with. So we went to one of our Amish neighbors and borrowed their snow scoop. And I should mention that we already were doing a bunch of our work with horses. We were a hybrid system with teams of horses that were part of our livestock operation, as well as our work on the farm, and also one small tractor. So we borrowed the snow scoop and we're pretty impressed with how it worked, and decided that it would be our decision. And the things where it's shown in terms of the testing guidelines were on the energy, money, source, and use. The energy was something we could produce on the farm ourselves in terms of both the feed for the horses and the horses, and because we raised foals and raised up teams and trained horses. And the other thing was that socially, since sometimes it was an Amish neighbor who'd be looking after the farm if we were away, they were comfortable using the snow scoop. And occasionally some of our Amish neighbors borrow our snow scoop if they've had an arrangement with somebody else to blow their lane. So we got a snow scoop, and the interesting thing there was that the money that we saved compared with going out to buy a snowblower was greater than what we'd spent on the holistic management course that we'd taken the year before. And that was a 9-day course, three 3-day sessions each month for 3 months. So again, there was something that showed me the power of thinking sort of outside the box, being creative, brainstorming, testing decisions, and then monitoring them, because it did work. We're still using it. and you get a lot less snow in your face when you're on a horse-drawn snow scoop than when you're on a snowblower. But we are a hybrid system now, and my daughter's taken over the farm, so we do have a snowblower, which if somebody's uncomfortable with the horses, they can still get out the lane. So, we adapt and we adopt things as we go along. The other thing that to me showed the power of holistic management and how we had grown in our use of it was in 2011. My slide here says, holistic management saves our holiday and our relationship, and some of the things that were in there. And the idea that you plan, monitor, control, and replan, well, this particular event was a real replanning opportunity. We had planned to take a 6-week holiday. We had an apprentice lined up to look after things, and we were going on a big tour with a little extended cab pickup truck that we'd used in 2005, and we were going to go visit a bunch of holistic management certified educators and practitioners, and visit a bunch of farms, and also do some hiking and some trail riding out west. And this was July and August, part of July and August, and but in the month before we were going, the little extended cab truck had like 3 different mechanical things go wrong with it. And they were things I could repair, but I was starting to think, this truck's getting pretty old. It was a 1995 and it's pretty rusty. And we get a lot of salt put on the roads up here in Ontario, and things have a way of degrading with that salt on the road. So I'd sort of raised the idea, maybe we ought to think about, using the car. Maybe we ought to think about, renting something, maybe we ought to trade the truck in, is this, big long trip out west, is this a good idea? But Fran was pretty keen. She'd actually done the research and bought the truck before the 2005 trip. And so she was pretty wedded to it. So we took off, got it all packed up, left home, and crossed into Michigan. And I filled the gas tank before we crossed the border. And we're driving along this cement highway going bump, 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 bump on all the expansion joints. And suddenly people are driving by and putting their hands out the window and pointing at us and pointing like something's going on. And so we pulled over and discovered that those expansion joints with the full tank had broken the straps which held the gas tank up. And the gas tank had dropped down onto the highway and sanded off a nice hole in it. And we'd left this big plume of gasoline behind us. And in an earlier incarnation, Tony McQuail would have been really unpleasant to Fran McQuail about the fact that he'd said we ought to not take this truck. But we looked at each other and we actually laughed and said, this looks like a replanning opportunity. We pulled the truck off onto the side of the road. We took any important papers that we had in our lunch and went across the ditch and sat up on the bank, so that if somebody threw a cigarette out and everything went boom, we wouldn't be right there. And we started using our holistic management tools. We started brainstorming, well, what are our options? What could we do? Well, Tony could hitchhike back to Ontario and try and find a used car lot and buy a replacement vehicle. We could try and get it repaired. We could maybe try and rent something. And we had taken out Canadian auto insurance, AA or CAA, AAA down in the States. And so we were able to call and get somebody to come and tow the truck. And they knew a garage, and we called the garage, and they thought they could replace the gas tank. But when they discovered it was an extended cab, they couldn't do it the next day. It was going to take a while to source a replacement tank. So we had decided not to try and buy a used vehicle on short notice, but we started then calling around to see if we could rent a vehicle for the period we were wanting to be away, which was over a month. And the first place we phoned, they said, you'd be lucky to get one for a weekend right now. This is the key time in the summer. Second place we called said, well, normally we don't rent for more than a month, but we can put an extension on. And so the next day we have the truck at the garage, And we transferred all our stuff from the truck to this rental car that we'd been able to pick up. And we got on our way. The only thing we couldn't take was the big cooler that was in the back of the truck. And we only missed visiting one of the holistic management certified educators in Michigan that we'd hoped to see that the night it all happened. But that woman is smiling at the moment. And if we hadn't had holistic management and I had been grumpy and reaming her out for wanting to take the truck for the last 24 hours, this would not look like nearly as happy scene. And so again, it just brought home to me the power of holistic management as a way of thinking and a way it changed how we relate to each other, to challenges, to problems, and the sort of regenerative aspect of that. Often as farmers, we think of regeneration in terms of our cropping practices or our grazing practices or our land management. But if we're going to have not only sustainable farm communities, but farm communities that are regenerating, we need to look after not only the environment and not only the economics, but very much the social and human interactions that we have. So I wanted to touch on succession planning briefly. I don't have a lot of slides, but I think holistic management helped us prepare for succession planning. I know one of the early exercises we did when we were trying to get in touch with our values and that was looking at where we'd be 10 years from now, 25 years from now, 50 years from now, and where our partner would be, where our kids would be, and that certainly helped me get out of the mindset of just projecting this year into next year and next year, just sort of thinking ahead a year at a time. So holistic management certainly helped us realize we needed a plan that, when I was 70, I probably wasn't going to be handling as many small square bales as I was when I was 45 or 40. Actually, good news, I'm still handling some small square bales and able to build a pretty good wagon. But I figured when I was 95, I certainly wasn't going to be. In fact, I was probably going to be growing hay bales if my ashes were spread on the farm rather than handling them. And I sort of brought some things into pretty sharp perspective. So when we turned 50, we started raising the issue with our daughters, who at that point were in their mid to late teens, that we weren't going to be farming forever. And if they had an interest in the farm, we might need to think about discussing it. And we'd gotten into the habit of holding an annual planning meeting in January to talk about what was important to people, what was on their want to really do list for the coming year. And for the first 7 years, there was no interest really. Initially the thought was, we don't even know who we are or what we want to do. Why would we want to take over a farm? But after 7 years, and at that point, after 7 years, we were also starting to say, well, if you're sure you're not interested, we need to find somebody else to be a successor, because we'd like to stay here if we can, but if we're going to stay here, we need somebody else who's taking over more of the work and that. And at that point, our younger daughter indicated she might be interested. So we started a process where she came back to the farm as a partner and worked with us on the farm, getting both a share of the work and a share of the income. And we also realized that if we were going to do this, we had to think about how this would affect other family members. We just have the two daughters, but both have a sense of connection to the farm. And so while we didn't create a holistic goal for the succession process, we certainly set out some goals and principles for the succession on the farm. And what we recognized that it was important that we come to an agreement that everybody felt pretty good about. And so, we started talking with everybody and getting everybody together to talk. And we wanted to come up with something that could keep the farm in the family and also be done in a way that had the family feeling good about it and enjoying each other as a family, as a somewhat extended family, on the farm and off it, because certainly you often don't have to go too far in a community to find farm succession and farm transition plans that went badly awry, and where kids aren't speaking to each other or aren't speaking to the parents, or well, that's certainly the case here, and I suspect it's not unique to Southern Ontario. And the other thing that had become important in our considerations was thinking about how to deal with the value of a farm asset if at some point the decision was made to sell it outside of the family. Because at one point, 50 years ago in this part of the world, the kid who got stuck with the farm was viewed as stuck with the farm by the other kids who'd gone off to university and become doctors and lawyers and teachers and nurses and dentists. They were so glad to be gone from the farm. And somebody else, one of the other kids got stuck looking after the folks on the farm and hanging out in the rubber boots and the coveralls. Land prices have gotten to the point that that's not the case, and farmland can become a real source of conflict, and the value of it, and particularly if it starts to be sold at what's called fair market value or speculative land value. So what we came up with was, the farm is a great place to live, but it's not an easy place to earn a living. These are some of the things we stated as we got into this. It really only has a cash value at the point at which you're selling it. Up until then, I think a farm has an incredible number of values, but money isn't necessarily one of them. And for us, we didn't see any benefit of selling farmland between family members at the market value. And we also thought if it was possible to finance sale within the family, that was a lot more attractive than being beholden to banks or trust companies. And again, that's certainly something Fran and I bring to it from our experience of watching farm foreclosures in the 1970s and early 80s. So we felt that if we could stay on the farm, our retirement costs are very, very low compared with if we moved into town. And so we're able to look at not trying to capture every last penny at the market value price from transactions. And the other aspect that came into that was that we had seen some friends sell farms or sell rural properties to the next generation at a very reduced price, at a very concessional price. And then after, a few years, the younger generation get tired of farming or whatever, and decide that they wanted to get out and sell the farm at a very large gain that wasn't shared with the parents who'd sold it. So we wanted to create a situation where the current market value was neither a huge burden to the incoming farmer that they had to, work off the farm for 20 or 30 years because of the huge purchase price, but that also wasn't a huge temptation to the incoming farmer to sell out and get out. And we came up with a process that had a two-part mortgage, one that they're actually paying on and one that's just being held. But if the farm were sold out of the family, that would come into play, so that Fran and I could recoup some of that market value. And we also came up with an arrangement for selling it to the other daughter. If the younger daughter decides she wants to stop farming and the older daughter would like to come back, that's a possibility. And also for children, our grandchildren, their children, to again avoid the huge cost of market value at this time. But we also have a clause in our agreement where if the farm is sold out of the family and is being sold at market value, we have a formula that recognizes the stewardship and investment that the person who carried on farming made, but also takes some of that market value and allocates it to other members in the family. So this was our effort to cover a lot of things. And I'll go back. The thing that it took a lot of time to do that, we'd hoped to do it in a year, but it took us about 3 years. We had to shop around and interview 5 different lawyers before we could find one who was actually interested in what we wanted to do and not just interested in selling us their template solution for farm succession. And to some extent, the same with financial planners. But we persevered, keeping in mind our principles and our observation. And it took a lot longer than hoped, but our younger daughter now owns and operates the farm. She and her husband are here on the farm, and they now have 2 daughters. And Fran and I are living in the house that we built on the property, and we have a life interest in it. And we continue to get lots of exercise on the farm and have a lot of time with these grandchildren. And fortunately, our other daughter and her husband and the grandchildren are only an hour and a half away. So we get to see them from time to time and get to host them here on the farm. The last 2 years with COVID has put some strains on our family's harmony. Different people's concerns about risk and different people's acceptance of things, but hopefully we are coming through that. And we do have a way of dealing with future succession or changes in who's interested in the farm. So, it's hard to know how it will all turn out, but at the moment, it feels like we have been making that transition and that holistic management helped us think about first that we had to do it, because a lot of farmers know that it's going to be awkward and maybe a bit challenging and just sort of don't address it until it's way too late. And that we did try and involve everybody and try to listen to everybody and hear the different concerns that people had, and come up with something that addressed those in a way that we could all feel, if not overjoyed, at least accepting of and reasonably happy with. So that's what I was wanting to share there. But we have decisions that we're making, and when we're dealing with changes, we have choices of what to do, what to buy. We talked about the ruptured gas tank succession. So we're making choices all the time, and the process of holistic management helps us make those choices in ways that take us toward who we want to be and where we want to go. And for me, holistic management is something that helped us regenerate and sustain our relationship as a couple and our relationships as a family. Helped us look after our land and our farm. And it's always a work in progress. I mean, that's the other, I think, powerful aspect of the holistic management model. It doesn't say you've got here, but you've got a way to keep moving in the direction you want to go. And that's the other process. The holistic goal we created in 1995 as a family with 2 early teen daughters is very different than the holistic goal that Fran and I have. Well, it's not wildly different, but it's significantly different than the holistic goal that Fran and I have now that we're moving into semi-retirement. But throughout the process and throughout those changes, as we've reevaluated it every year or a couple of years, it's certainly helped us go in a way that has helped us continue to feel like we're growing, that we're sometimes healing sore points in family relationships or healing our land, and that we're part of a cycle of growth and decay, of recognizing that things change and that. So now I thought this could be the time for questions and conversation, not necessarily question and answers, because I have, I bring my experience to it, but you all bring your experiences to this. And I certainly don't have all the answers, but hopefully this is a time when we can share some things, and I'll put that up for a few moments. So if there's, if you want to get my email, it's up there, TonyMcQuail@gmail.com. Phone number's there, 519-440-2511. And if you want to visit the daughter's website, it's meetingplaceorganicfarm.ca. So I'll leave that there for a moment, but if you're real excited, you can come back to it on the recording, and I'll stop sharing my screen so that we can see faces.
Thanks so much, Tony.
So if people have questions, feel free to shoot them, or topics you'd like to discuss. We're not a very large group at the moment, so feel free to unmute, and I'll mute until I have something to say.
I have something to say.
Hello, yeah, Tony. And if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself as well, and then maybe where you're at too, if you're asking a question, that'd be great.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, no problem. Hello, Tony. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure. I've been following this webinar week. It's been amazing. I'm Matthias Hargreaves. I'm currently at Oregon State University, but I doing my PhD in Brazil. But I'm from Chile. This is just a mixture. I took the course of holistic management in Chile, and I've been learning about it for a while. And one experience I wanted to share with everyone, and especially with Tony, I have a friend in the south of Chile. He's doing holistic management for a while. In one of the things, that reminds me of a case of when you talked about taking summer holidays and putting that into the planning. That was amazing, because this friend of mine, he was like making all the planning of holistic management in order to travel to Santiago de Chile. It was a 100-kilometer trip, like every once in a while, to see his daughter. And he said that it was okay. He kind of he could manage to put someone in charge or something like that while he was away. But he said that he was kind of struggling a little bit with peer pressure in terms of his neighbors were thinking it's not much happening in that farm. He's kind of a lazy guy, huh? So I wanted to ask you, Tony, what about your neighbors, or not neighbors, acquaintances?
Yeah. Community.
That peer pressure, that if you aren't bleeding and beating yourself with a whip on the back, you aren't really farming well, I don't, because it was the neighbors who stood us up at harvest time in 1975. I pulled their kids out of the ditch when they get stuck, and we have a good relationship with the son of that fellow who was but I'm not real dependent for my peer support group on my immediate neighbors, who may well think that, how can they do that? Those are crazy. You can't, who had the same attitude I had before I did it, which is, you're a farmer in Ontario, there's no blank, blank, blank way you can take a summer holiday. But because part of my peer group became the Ecological Farmers Association that we helped form, and as holistic management educators and practitioners, that's a really, really important point, though, Matthias. Is it Matthias? That you need to think about creating a peer group that supports your values and supports your vision and supports your goals. Because if everybody else around you is putting you down for your values, your goals, and your visions, it's much harder to sustain it. So, if you aren't getting support from your in-laws, or I'm in the fortunate position that I don't have a father-in-law who was on this farm. My daughter has the unfortunate position that she has her dad who was on the farm. And that's sometimes a challenge for the two of us because she feels I'm judging her when I'm not. I don't think I am. But if you're not getting the kind of support to move forward on your goal, that may be a log jam, as we call it in holistic management, that's holding you back because it saps your energy. If people are, judging you and criticizing you and saying, well, I guess your farm isn't very important to you. You're away again visiting your daughter, and what a waste of time that is. You might want to have a family relationship down the road, so figuring out how to let go of that kind of peer pressure and developing new peers who honor that balance of social, environment, and financial decision making. Anyway, you're still muted if you want to again.
Yeah, and I just want to echo that, Tony, that I think we're an international organization and we work with a lot of people all over the world doing this work. And this is such a common thing where it is sometimes lonely and sometimes you feel like the weird person out. And now we've worked with these folks who have been doing this, style of farming for 35, 45 years. And now we're going to their places and bringing community to their places going, look, you can do this too, because I think a lot of the community is at their wit's end or at that point where it's like, oh, look, there's another way to do this. So that has been really interesting as well. These kind of old timers that have thought that they were, on the fringe that are now kind of at the center of the conversation. And then how they have built their own communities and how, especially in Canada, actually, they have really robust management clubs that get together very regularly and support each other. And unfortunately find that, maybe outside their immediate community right now.
But I think that raises, for me, one of the important issues of how do we share this message with a broader farm community. A friend of mine just gave me this the other day, and it's called Gateway Center of Excellence in Rural Health. And the statistics they mention here is, according to a study, 57% of Canadian farmers meet the classification of anxiety. 45% meet the classification of high stress, and 35 meet the classification of depression. Well, that doesn't sound like a very happy situation. And I went from the position of being pretty weird when we decided to become organic after our 1975 crop non-harvest year, because we thought, well, if we don't have any inputs, at least we don't have to lose that money. But so we've been kind of weirdos to a degree in our community and had done work to build some different networks. But I went from being that person who didn't believe I could take a summer holiday and feeling at least some of those aspects of stress and anxiety and whatnot. And holistic management, financial planning, for the first time after 20 some years, helped my wife feel that she knew what our financial situation was, knew how our plan was, knew how we could monitor it. And the really interesting thing was, in 1996 was the first year we each took a farm draw. Up until then, we looked at what money was left in the farm account at the end of the year, and if there was some there, maybe we'd buy, a bolt bin so that we didn't have to run to town every time we needed a bolt, or a welder or something if there was money left. We finished out the 1996 year having paid ourselves a monthly draw. It wasn't a lot. I think it was like $300 a month, but a monthly draw, and had taken a summer holiday and had more money in the bank account at the end of the year than we'd had previously. So these were tools that worked. And, I went from being some of those aspects of anxiety, stress, and not feeling happy as a couple, to being much happier and taking that holiday and I think doing a better job of farming, because I think we were making better decisions. and certainly doing a better job as a parent and as a partner. So, but I would encourage your friend to find some people who say, yeah, your daughter's important, and making time to go spend time with your daughter is a really good thing to do. And doesn't that make you come back to your farm with more energy and more enthusiasm, since you don't feel trapped on it? You don't feel that it's preventing you from doing other important things in your life. Because that, to me, was the other really powerful part, was, the farm stopped being something that was managing me and dictating what I could do, and that I could plan to say, okay, yeah, I love to farm. I enjoy farming. At 70, I still want to go out and move cattle. I still want to go out and hitch the horses. But there are other things in life as well. And if you feel that your farm is keeping you from doing the things that give you a balance in life and a balance in your community, you aren't going to be able to sustain that. And it's certainly not going to be regenerative. And if we burn out the people who believe in looking after their soil and other stuff because we don't let them have a balanced life, I mean, that's where we're at on the whole planet right now, is we've got such an imbalanced thing that we're heading ourselves toward disaster. But to me, the regenerative message and the balance message of holistic management needs to go so far beyond the farm gate and the ranch into our broader decision-making processes and social planning and economic decision-making. But that's a whole nother story. I'll leave that.
Thank you so much, Sonny. That's so inspiring.
Thanks, Matthias. Have we got any other questions, or let me check the chat box? I think Amanda said that this is so relatable, and thanks so much for your wise words. Thanks for that, Amanda.
Well, thank you, Amanda. But everybody, I'm sure, has life experience and wisdom to share. So let's make this a conversation. I mean, I can rattle on about other stuff to fill the time, but a meeting shouldn't be just structured to fill the time available. And I would love to hear from all of you. Where you're from, what sort of farms you're involved with, or what sort of research you're doing. Because I think we all have something to contribute and share to the regeneration and transformation that we need if we're going to keep a place on the planet for the species Homo sapiens, who seem to have lost track of the fact that we're part of a web of life and not just a spaceship going somewhere.
Tony, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Just in case other folks are getting ready to. Okay, here we go. Actually, one second. Let me do this. Amanda says, curious about how you resolved your marketing dilemma. We have the same one. We raise amazing meat, but struggle to market it. You're muted, Tony. No, classic. Once a meeting, it has to happen.
With me, it'll happen more than once. It was a long time ago, Amanda. I mean, we're talking about the days of sending out information in an envelope with a stamp on it, or phoning people. But I think, if I remember correctly, we kind of called some of our existing customers and asked them for possible references of people that we could share our information with. We printed up a very simple little brochure talking about what we were doing and why we were doing it, that had an order form associated with it. We tried to reach out to people, and I was involved in several different organizations at that time that weren't where I went off actually to Toronto for quarterly meetings. And so we started building our customer base there as well. And that was part of what encouraged us to diversify our offerings, because people would say, well, it's nice to get your lamb, but do you have chicken? Could I get pork? Could I get beef? And that helped us realize that it would be a lot easier to sell a diversified package or diversified offering than it would be to sell all the lambs from 110 ewes. Lamb isn't a big meat, and it's sort of seen as a specialty and special occasion meat in Ontario, at least at that time. There are more ethnic communities now that would be looking to lamb or goat. But at that time, but basically contacting existing customers and giving them stuff that if somebody comes and they're serving them McQuail lamb or meeting place lamb, and the people say, oh, that was good, they have a brochure that they can give them, saying, oh, well, here's where we got it. So having that, but that, like, this is, historic ancient technology. Our daughter now certainly uses the internet much more. I think it's created a much more confusing space for people because, you can find stuff from all over the place. But I guess the other thing we did certainly was to host farm open houses. Fran started selling bedding plants in the spring as an offshoot of our market garden because she always raised more plants than she thought she would need, so that if an early frost did some damage or something, she'd have replacements. But she loves working in the greenhouse in February and March and April because it's a lot warmer than it is outside here in Ontario. And so started that. And so we started having a spring open house where people could come and tour the farm, go for a horse-drawn wagon ride, learn about what we were doing here. And that was also certainly a way of expanding our market. We're a relatively small operation, so we're not trying to sell hundreds of animals, but it did make a big difference to be able to retail both our vegetables and our livestock. And of course, one of the great challenges is abattoir space or slaughter facilities and local meat processing that will work with small custom operators as opposed to just big packing plants that only want stuff from the stockyards. So I don't know if that's a good answer. Do other people have experience that could help Amanda with that question, how you're approaching marketing?
I don't myself, Tony, but I do know that we do have a couple people in our network, Amanda, that I can connect you to, who I think would be happy to talk to you about this, who have done a pretty incredible job, I think more in the last 5 years, of really getting their marketing and just the ways that they're expanding their operations. I just wrote you in the chat. If you want to add your email there, that would be great, and I will send you some contacts.
Well, if nobody's jumping in, I'm going to do the holistic management thing and pull out my talking stick, which is now just my pocket knife. I usually have it on me, but an important tool. And I'm going to hand it off to somebody who's west. I can't see you because you're just a blank screen. But if you haven't just gone off to the washroom, if you could unmute and either also use your video if you've got video, but share with us who you are, where you're from, what kind of operation you have, and then I will pass the stick around since we aren't in a circle and can't just pass it hand to hand to each other. But everybody anticipate I'm going to call on you. But are you there, West? That's what shows up on my screen. Oh, well, the joy of Zoom, you can go take a nap and it's good. Okay, well, I'm going to go to Willard Heck. Willard, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Hang on just a second.
Sure.
Got to figure out how to.
Hi, Willard. Good to see you.
Yeah, you guys too. There we
We're
go.
going to see you next week in Denver.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'll be there.
Yay, that's great.
Well, actually, we don't have a whole lot going on right now. We're recovering from the long-term drought, and so we've destocked pretty much, and just kind of hanging loose, letting things recover. We've tried the direct marketing in the past. We struggle with it to the point where we just gave it up. We're in a remote location, and we didn't. We're so far for 4.5 hours, from Santa Fe and Albuquerque, which would be our primary markets, and it just didn't work for us. But also, we're biologists and not marketers, and so it takes somebody with certain skills to do that. So we ended up giving that up, but Anyway, so yeah, we're kind of in a holding pattern at the moment. Semi-retired, I guess you'd say. So not a whole lot going on.
Just question for me in terms of that semi-retired, and I certainly agree with you. Direct marketing is not for everyone, and you have to figure out what works for your values, your enthusiasms, and your context. And but I'm curious in terms of, are you in a position where you're working on any kind of succession plan or thinking about the future?
Well, yeah, I assume so. I'm an employee of the ranch. I don't own it. And my my boss and his family, who I work for, I'm basically part of the family. I've been working for the same boss for almost 50 years. So, we're pretty tight, but yeah, I think that, I don't know if they have anything written down, but their children are in 30 and 32 now, I think. And they definitely have strong attachments to the ranch, which that in itself is pretty gratifying. That they love to come back here and have the opportunity to. The one can work remotely anywhere he's got a connection, and the other one is loves it here and and would probably be the one that would take over from a biology point of view. So something's going to work out, I think, just because they're both highly interested in keeping the ranch in the family and doing something. But as far as whether there's something written down, I can't answer that. But yeah.
Well, thanks. I just that's one of the things that in Ontario, the aging population of ranchers and farmers has just been going up, and if we can't come up with good methods of succession, either within family or to a new interested incoming generation, we're going to see an awful lot of farmland bought up by pension funds and other stuff.
Right.
That isn't going to be good. Thanks, West. I see you shared in the chat a bit there, so thank you. And let me pass the talking stick on to Douglas. And then Amanda, we'll try and get to you before we run out of time. So Douglas, tell us just a little bit about who you are and anything you'd like to share before we bring this session to a close.
I think I remember Douglas saying that he doesn't have audio.
Okay, well then that we will waive. Amanda, let me pass it to you. Tell us a bit more about your operation and things.
Hi, we're in Maryland, so we're pretty far away, but we raise pastured livestock. We have raised sheep, and so we still raise lamb, pastured poultry, and we're going to reintegrate beef and pork in the coming couple of years, just like you said, to have more of a diversified array for folks. But we both still work off the farm. And so we really struggle to come up with, what's our niche in terms of marketing. We really love doing this work. Our oldest son is off at college now, and our younger daughter's still here. And so we're just trying to find that balance for us that we're on leased land. So it's all kind of, the way of making decisions that guides you to the right fit for your family is really what we're kind of looking for.
Great. Well, thank you, Amanda. And did I hear you correctly, Maryland?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're certainly in a very different position than Willard in terms of proximity to potential customers. But you're also in a place where land costs, I suspect, and the speculative value on land versus the agricultural value on land are burdensome in many ways. So those are things that certainly are part of what you have, part of the context you're juggling. But yeah, well, as I say, we don't use my daughter with two small children and a husband who works off the farm. He's a paramedic, and so at one point she said, well, I really took over an operation that was being run by 3 people because, Dad, you'd work all day and then you'd do paperwork at night. And so she's having to rethink the balance, and I'm hoping that she'll make greater use of the holistic management decision-making process than we maybe have in this last couple of years with two really small children, both of whom are still in diapers, and that, so that she can move into a balance that works for her in her current family context, and also that works as we become less able to be as supportive on the farm. So as I say, these are things that are works in progress, and but I think that probably takes us close to our time ending. And does anyone want to add anything before we say thank you all for coming? And for anyone who's joining this in the evening, which is how I intend to watch a good many of these presentations when I don't have a sunny day outside and other things I could be doing outside. Hopefully this is useful, and you've got my email and phone number if there's something you want to follow up on and weren't here in real time, or whatever they call it these days, live time, whatever, weren't here live, you're welcome to get in touch and that. So anyway, any last words from anyone, or I'll turn it back to Marie to close things down, or to Lynn.
I just wanted to thank you again, Tony, for sharing your story and experiences with us.